Sometimes justice arrives not on the day you were betrayed, but on the day you look the betrayer in the eye, with dignity. Unknown author. Anna was kicked out quietly, without hysterics, without broken dishes, almost mundanely, like taking out the trash, her belongings, tiny baby onesies, bottles with nipples, a couple of her own sweaters, all fit into one old suitcase. It was simply placed by the door. "You brought this all on yourself." His voice was even, almost indifferent, as if stating the weather outside. "I didn't ask for this, child. This was your choice." His mother stood beside him, her face a mask of icy composure. She added, pursing her lips, "Our family isn't a shelter for outsiders, and we're not obligated to feed other people's children." And so, she stands in the dim light of the hallway bulb. In her arms, a tiny, sleeping bundle, her 3-month-old daughter. In one hand, an old bag with the bare necessities. With the other, she instinctively clutches the baby blanket closer, trying to shield her from the cold that was already seeping through her thin jacket. Outside, it's 5 degrees Fahrenheit. Snow crunches under the rare footsteps of passers-by with a sharp biting sound. And she is silent. Inside, everything is screaming, tearing apart from pain, resentment, fear. But there are no tears. Crying now was an unaffordable luxury. No time. She needs to go. Where? Unknown. But she must. Yet, not long ago, she had a life. Simple, yes, but her own. A small rented apartment with a guitar in the corner she'd strum in the evenings. A job at the pharmacy, the smell of medicine, quiet conversations with elderly customers. Dreams. So ordinary, earthly, to see the ocean, maybe someday open a tiny coffee shop smelling of cinnamon and fresh pastries. And then he appeared, handsome, confident, a little older, which gave him even more charm and reliability in her eyes. He spoke words that made her head spin, that she was special, not like all his exes, that for her, he was ready for anything, to abandon his usual life, start fresh. She believed him. How could she not, when her heart beat so loudly? But when the 2 lines on the pregnancy test became reality, the fairy tale crumbled to dust. All the promises turned out to be empty words. He simply vanished, then reappeared, only to say he was returning to his previous life, to his family. And she was left alone, with a growing belly, an empty bank account, and a marriage certificate that suddenly meant nothing. His family refused even to let her stay temporarily. Childbirth was an ordeal, scary, painful, and desperately lonely. No one held her hand, offered words of support, only the cold walls of the hospital room and her own ragged breathing. But when she first held that small, warm bundle in her arms, so helpless and completely dependent on her, she knew there was no turning back. She was responsible for this tiny life. She named her daughter Lisa, after her grandmother, a woman of incredible kindness, strength, and a kind of innate, unbending honesty. A different life began. Survival. First, there was a room in an old boarding house, peeling wallpaper stained with mold, a constantly occupied shared bathroom down the hall, neighbors in stretched-out sweatpants and worn-down slippers, the smell of cheap food from the communal kitchen. Then, a damp, cold basement that smelled of earth and hopelessness. Then, a tiny room on the outskirts of the city, with a distant, almost forgotten relative, who took pity, but constantly reminded her of his kindness. She took any job she could find, scrubbed stairwells in other people's buildings, her hands rubbed raw by the icy water, worked as a hospital aide, witnessing others' pain and trying not to think about her own, took jobs as a nanny for other, luckier children, while her own Lisa waited for her in a cold room. Hauled heavy boxes in a drafty warehouse, feeling her back ache. Was she proud of it? No. Did she complain? Also no. She simply did what she had to do. Every penny earned went towards food for Lisa, medicine when she was sick, warm clothes. For herself, whatever was left over. Often, nothing was left. Time passed. When Lisa turned 5, Anna got lucky. She found a job at the local library, a quiet, modest place. The salary was small, but the main thing was books. A whole world opened up to her, and she began to read. At night, when Lisa slept, she immersed herself in thick volumes of law. Not because she dreamed of a career as a lawyer or judge. No, she was looking for answers, trying to understand the rules of this world that had treated her so cruelly. Why did some get everything, money, status, family support, while others had to fight for basic survival? Why did lies and betrayal often sound so loud and confident, drowning out the quiet voice of truth? Why did society so often judge a single mother as if she had committed a crime rather than simply being left alone with a child? The books didn't provide direct answers, but something inside her was changing. Anger and resentment gradually gave way to another feeling, hard as steel. It wasn't a thirst for revenge, it was determination. The determination to endure, to prove, not to him, not to them, but to herself, that she could make it. Lisa grew up, a smart girl with a serious gaze beyond her years, reserved, calm, as if she had absorbed her mother's silent strength. She learned to read at 5. At 7, she wrote without a single mistake, and at 10, she knew exactly who she would become. "I'm going to be a lawyer, Mom," she said one evening, looking at Anna with her clear eyes. "To protect people like you, so that other women with children don't cry in cold hallways, so that no one can just throw them out onto the street like that." Anna felt a lump rise in her throat. She squeezed her daughter's hand tightly. "You will become someone, Lisa," she said quietly but firmly. "That one day, those who hurt us won't be able to look you in the eye. They will stare at the floor." They went through everything: poverty, judgment from neighbors and officials, the cold of rented corners, humiliating pleas for help that made her want to disappear into the ground. But they were together, without loud complaints, without curses aimed at the past, only with a quiet but unyielding faith in themselves, and in each other. Anna didn't seek him out, didn't try to get revenge. She just lived, survived, and raised her daughter. A daughter whose heart might one day falter beneath a stern judge's robe at the sight of a familiar face. But her voice would not falter. Ever. The first year after that day in the hallway dragged on like one endless, gray, cold dream. The world wasn't hostile to Anna. No. It was simply indifferent, as if she and her little daughter didn't exist. In that first room at the boarding house, wallpaper hung in shreds. The gas stove in the shared kitchen worked sporadically, and the radiators were barely warm. From her old coat and some other scraps, Anna sewed Lisa something resembling a blanket. For herself, nothing. She slept covered by her jacket. Food. Often it was just porridge made from flour and water. Sometimes, if she managed to get child support benefits, or a neighbor shared, there was milk. She cleaned floors at a nearby store for expired groceries, washed other people's laundry in an old galvanized tub, the cold water making her bones ache. One day, Lisa got very sick. A high fever, a cough that racked her small chest. There was absolutely no money for a doctor or medicine. Desperate, Anna stood outside the closed pharmacy half the night, waiting for the morning shift. She begged the pharmacist to sell her antibiotics on credit, on her word. The young woman behind the counter looked at her for a long time, then at the old prescription from a paramedic, and sighed. She sold the medicine for half price, out of her own pocket. Since then, Anna always tried to go only to that pharmacy. Every time, even buying just a Band-Aid, she would quietly say, "Thank you, for not walking past back then." She tried to get child support, hired a public defender, gathered some documents, but in court, everything fell apart. Her ex-husband's expensive lawyer spoke eloquently and convincingly, accused Anna of greed, of attempting illicit enrichment at the expense of a respected man, of manipulating the child for financial gain. The judge, an elderly, tired man, didn't seem to grasp the essence of the case. He simply followed the letter of the law. Child support is awarded only after paternity is officially established, he mumbled. Was a DNA test performed? Of course, no test had been done. That also required money they didn't have, and Peter would have simply not shown up. Since he left before the birth and didn't acknowledge paternity voluntarily, there are no grounds. Claim denied. Anna walked out of the courtroom feeling hot tears stinging her cheeks. Lisa, still tiny then, sat on her lap, looking uncomprehendingly at her mother. "Mommy, why are you crying? Isn't that man in the nice suit going to help us?" Anna swallowed the lump in her throat and tried to smile. "No, sweetie. That man, he just didn't stop us from moving on, by ourselves." Once, she stood in a long line for charity aid. They were giving out baby formula. Behind her, two women whispered loudly, not caring much if she heard. She brought it on herself, got knocked up by God knows who, and now she's begging. Yeah, types like her always claim it's great love first, then run to the government for help. Should have used her head before spreading her legs. Anna stood like stone. Didn't turn around, didn't say a word. Just held Lisa tighter, burying her face in her daughter's hair, which smelled of baby shampoo and her only hope. How many times had she wanted to scream from helplessness, from injustice, from exhaustion, to curl up in a corner and just howl. But instead, she studied. At night, when Lisa slept in their tiny room, Anna sat at the table under a cheap desk lamp and read. Law, social welfare rights, history of the judicial system. The word justice ceased to be an abstract dream for her. It became a craft, a tool that might one day help others, if not her. Years went by. The 4th year of drifting, the job at the library, stability, albeit modest. The 7th, she took the plunge and enrolled in evening law courses, work during the day, classes in the evening, homework and caring for Lisa at night. The 10th year, a law degree, a part-time one, but real. The 15th, her first modest position, an internship as a clerk in the city court. People around her began to look at her differently, with respect, reserved, yes, but genuine, not because they pitied her story, but because they saw her perseverance, her intelligence, her quiet but unbending strength. She had achieved this herself, silently, gritting her teeth. And at home, Lisa was always waiting for her, her grown-up, serious daughter. Lisa never saw her mother's tears of despair, but she saw her mother sitting over books until dawn, saw her preparing for exams, saw her calmly and logically arguing on the phone with officials, defending her own rights or someone else's, saw her refuse help if she felt she hadn't earned it through honest work. "We must be honest, Lisa," Anna would say. "Above all, with ourselves. Honesty is when you're scared, when it's hard, when you want to cheat or give up, but you still do what's right. You keep moving forward." Lisa remembered those words, forever. And when the time came to choose her path, to apply to college, She didn't chase prestige or ease. She chose what held deep personal meaning for her. Law school, at the state university, on a scholarship, on her own merit. On the day the results were announced, Anna stood outside the admissions office door. Her hands trembled as if she were the one taking the most important exam of her life. The door opened and Lisa came out, calm and smiling. That rare, bright smile Anna didn't see often. "Mom, I got in." And then Anna, for the first time in many, many years, covered her face with her hands and cried, openly, unashamedly, in front of passers-by. But these weren't tears of pain or resentment. They were tears of relief. Tears of knowing that it hadn't all been in vain. Every sleepless night, every humiliating request, every year of struggle, it all had meaning. When Lisa entered law school, Anna didn't beam with pride like other mothers. She mostly remained silent and observed, because she knew this girl wasn't just her successful daughter. She was living proof. Proof that even without money, without support, without connections, against the system, you could cultivate light within yourself and ignite it in others. Lisa didn't just do well in her studies, she excelled. She received an enhanced scholarship, which was a huge help. By her second year, she started working as a judge's clerk, gaining experience, absorbing the atmosphere of justice from the inside. Then came postgraduate work, research, and soon, next to her name in academic circles, a new phrase began to appear. Promising candidate, future judge. Anna continued her quiet, measured life. Her job at the library, which had become almost a second home. A small, but now her own, apartment, bought with a joint mortgage with Lisa. Missy the cat, rescued as a kitten from the street. Violets on the windowsill. Bills paid on time. And most importantly, letters from Lisa. Long, detailed, full of thoughts and news, and evening phone calls. "Mom, I remember everything. I'll never forget. I'll do anything for you, do you hear?" Anna would smile into the phone. "Sweetheart, I don't expect anything from you. I don't need anything. Just be honest. Always. With people, with the law, but most importantly, with yourself." And then, silence fell. For a week, Lisa didn't call. She responded to infrequent texts briefly. Swamped at work, very tired, exams, later. Anna sensed something was happening, but she didn't ask. She had learned to wait. A couple of weeks later, in the mailbox, she found not a utility bill, but a real paper envelope, with an official seal. Inside, a letter written in Lisa's familiar, slightly angular handwriting. "Mom, I've been appointed a judge, a federal judge. I'll be working in the district court. Nobody here knows our story. Nobody knows I'm that little girl from the cold hallway 30 years ago. But you know. And I want you to come to my first hearing. Not for the record, not for show. Just sit in the gallery, nearby, so I can feel you there. So I don't forget where it all started, and what it's all for." Anna went. She took with her a small, faded bundle, the very same baby blanket Lisa was wrapped in on that day, not as a relic, as a reminder of the fragility of life and the strength of the spirit. She sat in the front row of the large, echoing courtroom. She wore a simple dark coat, her hair neatly tied in a bun, no jewelry. Only her eyes, calm, attentive, full of a kind of inner light. And then Lisa entered, in a stern black robe that made her look taller, older, stricter, with a folder of documents in her hands. She sat behind the high judge's bench, surveyed the room, began the session. Her voice, even, confident, without a trace of nervousness. Her back, perfectly straight. Anna looked at her. and her heart clenched with a mixture of pride, pain, and disbelief. Could this really be the tiny infant she had carried through the shabby corridors of the boarding house while scrubbing floors? Could this really be her girl, now administering justice? The first case passed, routine, then the second, and then the clerk announced, "Calling case number 237, the United States versus Peter Evans, charged under Title 18, United States Code, Section, Relevant Fraud Statute Reference Implied, Major Fraud, committed by an organized group or resulting in exceptionally large losses. The defendant is present in the courtroom." The name, first, last, something painfully familiar struck her ear. Anna raised her eyes to the defendant's dock and froze. The blood drained from her face. There, next to an expensive, polished lawyer, stood him. The man who, 30 years ago, had put her and her child out in the cold. Grayer now, a bit heavier, wearing expensive thin-rimmed glasses. But the look, that piercing, slightly mocking gaze, it remained the same. He wasn't looking around, not scanning the audience. His attention was fixed on the figure in the judge's robe. And the judge was looking directly at him, without averting her gaze, without a hint of hatred, without malice, without a tremor in her voice or hands. Only with one unspoken thought, ringing in the deafening silence of her mind. "You didn't recognize me, but I haven't forgotten." A tense silence hung in the courtroom, broken only by the rustling of the clerk's papers. Lisa sat behind the high bench, her face seeming carved from pale marble. Not a single muscle twitched. Nothing betrayed the storm raging inside. The reading of the charges, procedural questions, witness examinations, everything proceeded in order according to strict procedure. An ordinary case of financial fraud. But for her, for Lisa, it wasn't ordinary. It couldn't possibly be. It was him. The man who had once slammed the door in her mother's face, leaving them alone with the cold and hopelessness. The man because of whom her childhood lacked pretty toys, a warm winter coat not bought on clearance, her own bed for many years. The man whose name she knew but never uttered aloud, as if afraid to resurrect the ghost of the past. And now, he was here, in the defendant's dock. His expensive lawyer fussed nearby, dressed in an impeccable suit, a faint, uncertain smile on his face, the look of a man accustomed to solving problems with money. He didn't recognize her. Of course not. How could he recognize, in this stern, confident woman, vested with authority, that same little girl, the daughter of the woman he had so easily erased from his life? To him, she was just a function, just a judge, another obstacle to be overcome. Lisa listened to the testimony from the prosecution witnesses, then the defense. She carefully studied the thick folders of financial documents, invoices, contracts, made notes in her legal pad. Everything, strictly by the book, as she had been taught for years, as the law demanded. But inside, everything was churning. It wasn't anger anymore. No. Nor was it old childhood resentment. Rather, a strange, almost mystical feeling, as if a huge circle, stretching across 30 years, was finally closing. Here. Now. A recess was called. Lisa slowly rose and walked out of the courtroom into the empty, echoing corridor. Anna was waiting for her there, sitting on a wooden bench against the wall, with the same quiet, impenetrable expression she had worn 30 years ago in the cold hallway. Lisa approached and silently sat beside her. They sat like that for several minutes, without saying a word. Then Lisa spoke quietly, almost in a whisper. "Did you know? Did you know it would be him today?" Anna shook her head. "No, of course not," she replied just as quietly. "But when I heard the name, something inside me jumped, I felt it. I have to deliver a verdict. Lisa's voice was steady, but Anna caught a barely perceptible tremor. Based on all the documents, the testimony, he's guilty. There's more than enough evidence. But now everyone who finds out, they'll think I was just settling scores, that it was revenge. Anna turned to her daughter, took her hand, cold, tense, in hers. Lisa, listen to me. You're sitting in that chair not because he acted despicably once. You're here because you walked your own path, because you became strong, smart, just, against all odds. And if you now deliver a verdict based solely on the law and your conscience, without thinking about the past, without thinking about what others will say, you won't just free him from uncertainty, you will free yourself, forever, from this shadow. The court session resumed. Lisa returned to the courtroom, sat in her place, put her stern glasses back on, picked up the case file, took a deep breath, exhaled, and raised her eyes to the defendant. He still didn't recognize her, looked at her with faint arrogance mixed with poorly concealed anxiety. He saw before him merely a faceless figure of justice, but she saw everything. His past, her past, their shared, broken past. That was precisely why her voice, when she began to read the verdict, sounded so firm and dispassionate. The court, having reviewed the materials of the criminal case, delivers the verdict. The court finds the defendant, Peter Evans, guilty of the crime stipulated under Title 18, United States Code, Section Relevant Fraud Statute implied, major fraud committed, resulting in exceptionally large losses. He is hereby sentenced to a term of imprisonment of 4 years to be served in a state correctional facility, to be taken into custody immediately in this courtroom. A restrained murmur went through the room. The defendant's lawyer turned pale and lowered his eyes. Evans himself froze, as if struck by lightning. He stared at Lisa with wide eyes. The previous arrogance was gone. Only shock, disbelief. He clearly hadn't expected this outcome, not from this young female judge. Lisa slowly rose, took off her glasses, and calmly looked directly at him. And at that very moment, as their eyes met without the barrier of the judge's bench and protocol, he recognized her. Something elusive in her features, the set of her eyes, the expression of her lips. Memory, dormant for 30 years, suddenly awakened. His face trembled, sweat beaded on his forehead. His lips moved silently, whispering something like, "Anna? No. Lisa?" He took a step forward, as if wanting to say something, to ask, but the bailiffs were already taking his arms. And she simply turned and walked towards the exit of the courtroom, with a steady, unhurried pace, without a trace of triumph on her face, without malice, not looking back. Anna was waiting for her in the corridor. Lisa walked over, sat down beside her on the same bench. "He recognized me," she said quietly, "right at the very end, when I took off my glasses." "And what did you feel?" Anna asked just as quietly. Lisa paused, gazing ahead with unseeing eyes. Then she slowly said, "Liberation. Not from him, from the past. Like a weight lifted from my soul." "Then you did the right thing," Anna said simply. "You acted justly. And true justice is when no one is humiliated, not even the one who is guilty and has received punishment." The next day, a short article appeared in the local newspaper's crime blotter section. State court sentenced prominent former official and businessman P.E. Evans to 4 years in prison for organizing a fraudulent scheme resulting in substantial losses. The presiding judge was noted by colleagues for demonstrating objectivity and strict adherence to the law. The judge's name was not mentioned, but Anna carefully cut out the clipping with scissors. and placed it in an old cardboard folder where she kept Lisa's few childhood photos. There she was in her mother's arms, by that same building entrance. There she was with her first reader. There, receiving her diploma. In the margin of the newspaper clipping, Anna wrote in her own hand a short note. You won, without shouting, without revenge, simply with the truth. Several weeks passed, a typical winter evening. They sat in the small kitchen of Anna's apartment, just as they had hundreds of times before. Anna was peeling apples for a pie. Lisa drank hot tea, warming her hands on the mug. Missy, the cat, slept curled up by the warm radiator. Outside, snow fell softly, blanketing the city in white. You could have done things differently back then, Anna began, not looking at her daughter. Given him more time, or less. Found a way. Lisa slowly nodded. I could have. The thought crossed my mind, Mom, for a second, to get revenge for everything. But if I had given in to that feeling, how would I have been any different from him? I would have become just like him. Anna looked up and smiled, warmly, brightly, as only she could. But you became better, sweetheart. Much better. They sat in silence again for a moment. Mom, thank you for not breaking back then, 30 years ago, for not giving up. And thank you, Lisa, for not forgetting. Lisa looked her mother straight in the eye. There was no longer a shadow of the past in her gaze, only quiet strength and love. I haven't forgotten anything, Mom, not a single day, but I don't hold on to it anymore. He made his choice back then, and you made yours. You stayed. You raised me. And that is the real victory. On the kitchen wall, among other photos, hung one, the oldest, slightly yellowed. A little girl in a funny onesie in the arms of a young woman, a dreary building entrance in the background. Beneath the photo, an inscription written long ago in Anna's hand. No one escapes the truth, even if you have to wait 30 years for it.